I never thought a single photo could destroy 30 years of love. One morning, while scrolling through Facebook with my cup of coffee, I saw it. My daughter, smiling in a white wedding dress, surrounded by people I barely knew. No message, no call, no invitation, just a caption that read, "Family complete." That's when I understood. I wasn't part of that word anymore. The next day, I sold the house that carried every memory of her, and I vanished from the life that had already erased me. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about what happens when a mother finally decides to choose herself. Before we continue, tell me where you're listening from. Don't forget to add your country's flag and the city you're in. I read every comment, and it truly warms my heart to see how far our stories travel. The phone slipped from my hands and hit the kitchen floor with a dull thud. The screen still showed the photo. My daughter Hope, dressed as a bride, smiling beside a man I barely knew. "Hope, did you get married?" "Yes, Mama, yesterday." On the other end, I could hear street noises. Cars, footsteps, voices, everything except emotion. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you invite me?" "It was something small, Mama, just family." That word echoed in my head. Family. I picked up the phone, looked at that frozen smile on the screen, and understood that maybe I had become a detail outside the frame. I deleted the photo, and in the silence that remained, a question formed that I still can't answer today. What does a mother do when she stops being family? I'm Mary Louise Henderson, and for 67 years I believed that family was everything. I raised my daughter Hope alone after my husband James left this life. I worked cleaning 2 different houses to pay for her education. I saved every dollar so she could have the wedding of her dreams. I always imagined I'd be by her side at the altar, holding her hand, watching her achieve what I thought was every woman's greatest dream. But last Tuesday, while drinking my morning coffee and checking my phone, I saw a photo on Facebook that changed everything. Hope in a white dress standing next to her husband, Ryan Gallagher, with only his parents, Thomas and Evelyn Gallagher, as their companions. My eyes traced every detail of that image several times. Hope was radiant, smiling like I'd never seen her smile before, and in the background was written, "Our special day, family complete." Family complete without me. There was no invitation, no conversation, no explanation. I discovered my daughter got married the same way any stranger discovers news on the internet. My heart broke inside in a way I hadn't felt even when James passed away. There, sitting in my kitchen in San Antonio with my coffee cup trembling in my hand, I understood that for Hope, I no longer existed as a mother, just as an uncomfortable memory from the past. I called her 3 times that day. All the calls went straight to voicemail. I sent messages asking if everything was okay, if she needed anything, pretending I hadn't seen anything. The response came only at the end of the afternoon. "Mama, I'm fine. We'll talk later. We'll talk later." As if her own daughter's wedding was just any matter that could be left for later. That night, lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized I had spent my entire life being a mother to someone who no longer considered me necessary. And in that silence of the early morning hours, a new Mary Louise began to wake up inside me. During the following days, memories came like ocean waves. I remembered when Hope was 5 years old and got pneumonia. I worked during the day cleaning the Rodriguez family's house in the suburbs, and at night I sewed for the Morales family across town. For 15 days, I didn't sleep more than 3 hours a night taking care of her, taking her to the doctor, buying expensive medicines. When she finally recovered, she hugged me and said, "Mama, when I grow up and get married, you're going to be the prettiest maid of honor in the world." Those words had lived in my heart for more than 20 years. I also remembered when she turned 15. I had been saving for 2 years to throw her a memorable party. I sold some jewelry I had from my marriage. I worked extra weekend shifts. I deprived myself of basic things. We rented the Sunset Hall in the valley. I bought the most beautiful dress I could find. I hired a country band. I prepared all the traditional food. That day, Hope told me I was the best mother in the world, that she would always remember everything I had done for her. The guests commented that you could see the love in every detail of the celebration. Also coming to mind were the daily sacrifices. The mornings I got up at 5 to prepare her breakfast before she left for school. The afternoons I spent helping her with homework, even though I hadn't finished elementary school. The nights I stayed awake waiting for her when she went out with friends, worrying about her safety. The Sundays I brought pot roast to Grandma Dorothy's house so Hope could spend time with her father's family. When she entered the University of Texas to study business administration, I increased my working hours. I cleaned the Rodriguez house Monday through Friday, and on weekends I worked catering events. I wanted her to focus only on studying, not worry about money. Every time my knees ached after so many hours on my feet, or when my hands cracked from so much cleaning, I thought about the bright future Hope would have thanks to her education. During those university years, she began to change subtly. She no longer came straight home after classes. She had study meetings, group projects, extracurricular activities. On weekends, she went out with friends I didn't know to places that were completely foreign to me. When I asked about her day, the answers became shorter, more distant. "It was fine, Mama. I'll tell you later." But later never came. It was during her final year of university that she met Ryan Gallagher. The first time she mentioned him, I noticed a special light in her eyes. She talked about him constantly, how intelligent he was, how he came from a good family, how he had ambitious plans for the future. I was happy to see her happy, but I also felt a pang of something I couldn't identify at that moment. It was as if Ryan represented a world I didn't belong to. A future where there would be no space for a mother who cleaned other people's houses. The first time Ryan came to dinner at our house, I prepared pot roast, cornbread, green beans, and sweet iced tea, everything homemade. I put more effort into it than ever before. I wanted to make a good impression. Ryan was polite, courteous, but I noticed how his eyes surveyed our small house with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Hope seemed nervous, constantly explaining things as if she had to justify our way of living. "Your home is very nice, Mrs. Henderson," Ryan said when he left. But there was something in his tone that made me feel like he had said the opposite. That night, Hope told me I had been too intense, asking so many questions about his family, his work, his plans. "Mama, not everyone is like us, sharing their whole life story in the first conversation." That was the first time I felt like I was being seen as a problem to be solved. From that moment on, Ryan's visits became less frequent. When he came, the conversations were more superficial, more formal. Hope began spending more time out with him, returning later and later each time. Family Sundays became occasional, then sporadic, until they disappeared completely. "Ryan and I have plans" became the most common phrase in her vocabulary. When Hope graduated, I was so proud I cried through the entire ceremony. She had accomplished what I never could, finishing a college degree. She was going to have opportunities I never had. After graduation, we went to celebrate at a nice restaurant in Austin. Ryan had also invited his parents, Thomas and Evelyn. It was the first time I met them formally. Thomas was a manager at an important company in Dallas. Evelyn had been a teacher for many years before retiring. They talked about travels, elegant restaurants, theater shows. I tried to participate in the conversation, but I felt like a fish out of water. When I mentioned that I worked cleaning houses, there was an uncomfortable silence that Hope quickly filled by changing the subject. That night, when we got home, Hope said something that hurt me deeply. "Mama, I know you always try to be nice, but sometimes you say things that can be misunderstood. Ryan's parents are very refined people." Refined. That word stayed engraved in my mind. I wasn't refined. My love, my sacrifice, my dedication meant nothing compared to money and formal education. The following months brought growing distance. Hope got a job at a multinational company. Ryan also had a good position. They began talking about becoming independent, renting an apartment together. I supported the idea, though inside my heart was breaking. "Young people need their space," I told them, feigning enthusiasm. When they finally moved to an apartment in an exclusive area of San Antonio, I was still welcome, but with schedules and conditions. "Mama, better let us know before coming over to see if we're here," Hope would tell me. The spontaneity of simply dropping by to visit my daughter was lost forever. Now I had to make an appointment, as if I were a doctor or dentist. The visits became increasingly spaced out, first every week, then every 2 weeks, then once a month. When I went, the conversation mainly revolved around their jobs, their plans, their friends. I listened with interest, but they rarely asked about my life. It was as if I existed solely in relation to them, as if my only identity was being Hope's mama. During last year's Christmas holidays, I noticed that Hope and Ryan had begun spending more time with the Gallagher family. "It's just that Ryan's parents have such beautiful traditions," Hope explained when I asked if they would come for Christmas Eve dinner, as we always had. "But next year we'll organize it ourselves, right?" Next year never came, or rather, it came without me. It was in February when Hope told me she and Ryan were thinking about getting married. "How wonderful, my daughter!" I exclaimed, feeling a mixture of joy and anticipation. I immediately began making mental plans. The church, the dress, the flowers, the food. "Have you thought about a date? How can I help?" "Mama, we want something simple," Hope said. But there was something evasive in her look. "Nothing too elaborate. It's not like before when weddings were so complicated." I nodded, though inside I felt a small disappointment. I had dreamed for years about helping plan my only daughter's wedding. The months passed, and conversations about the wedding became vague and sporadic. When I asked about specific details, Hope always had the same response. "We're still looking into it, Mama. As soon as we have something definite, we'll let you know." I began to feel that something wasn't right, but I didn't know exactly what. In May, I noticed that Hope had begun posting photos on Facebook more frequently. Photos with Ryan, with the Gallagher family, at elegant restaurants, in places I didn't recognize. But when we saw each other in person, she told me very little about these events. It was as if there were two parallel lives, one she shared with me and another she lived in secret. It was at the beginning of June when I began to suspect that something was definitely happening. Hope canceled 3 meetings in a row to see us, always with excuses of work or urgent commitments. When we finally met, she seemed distracted, nervous. I asked her directly if everything was okay with Ryan, if there was any problem. "Everything's perfect, Mama," she told me, but she wouldn't look me in the eyes. "It's just that we're very busy with work and other things." Other things. Those words resonated in my mind for days. What other things could be more important than including her mother in her life? The last time I spoke with Hope before discovering the truth was on a Sunday afternoon. I called to invite her to breakfast the following Tuesday morning. "I can't, Mama," she said. "I have a very important meeting that morning." It was strange because Tuesday mornings had always been our special time since she was little. It was the only day of the week I didn't work at the Rodriguez house. "What about Wednesday, then?" I insisted. "I don't know, Mama. Let me check my schedule and I'll call you back." But she never called back, and I, as I always had, patiently waited for her call that never came. It was Tuesday morning, exactly when I should have been having breakfast with my daughter, that I sat in my kitchen with my coffee and sweet bread, logged onto Facebook to see photos of my neighbors and their grandchildren, and came across the image that would change my life forever. There was Hope, more beautiful than ever, in a simple but elegant wedding dress, smiling next to Ryan in what was clearly a wedding ceremony. In the background, I could see the happy faces of Thomas and Evelyn Gallagher, dressed elegantly, posing as the only witnesses to that moment that should have been mine, too. The photo's caption read, "Finally married. Thanks to our families for making this day perfect." Our families, plural, but I didn't appear anywhere. I wasn't in the photo, I wasn't in the comments, I wasn't in that story that was supposed to include my entire life. I read every comment on that post, university friends congratulating them, co-workers sending blessings, some distant relatives expressing surprise at not having known about the wedding, but no comment mentioned my absence. It was as if I had never existed in Hope's life, as if these 28 years of sacrifice and love had been completely erased from her personal history. I spent the rest of that day in a kind of shock. I checked my phone over and over, expecting a call, a message, an explanation. Nothing. Hope had continued with her normal life, posting honeymoon photos, thanking people for congratulations, sharing moments of happiness from which I had been completely excluded. That night, while lying in bed staring at the ceiling of my small bedroom, I understood something that hurt more than I had imagined possible. My daughter hadn't forgotten to include me in her wedding. She had consciously excluded me. She had made the deliberate decision that I would not be part of the most important day of her life. And in that moment of painful clarity, I knew that my life, as I had known it until then, had ended forever. But what Hope didn't know was that her mother, Mary Louise, had saved much more than just pain during all these years of sacrifice. She had also saved a strength she didn't know she possessed, a dignity that had been sleeping but never dead, and a capacity for decision-making that was about to change everything forever. The woman who got up from that bed Wednesday morning was no longer the same one who had been patiently waiting to be included in her daughter's life. She was a woman who had finally understood that some absences speak louder than any presence, and that sometimes the greatest love a mother can show is respect for her own dignity. In that silent early morning in San Antonio, while the bells of the neighborhood church marked 3 o'clock, Mary Louise Henderson made the first completely personal decision she had made in almost 30 years. If she was no longer welcome in Hope's life, then Hope would no longer be welcome in hers either. But this story was just beginning, and what would come next would change everyone's lives forever in ways none of them could have imagined. The following days passed like a dense fog that wouldn't let me see clearly where my life was heading. Hope didn't call to explain, didn't show up at the house, didn't show any sign of regret. She continued posting honeymoon photos from Hawaii as if nothing had happened, as if I were just another follower on her social media. Each new photo was like confirmation that I really was no longer part of her life. I tried to keep busy with household chores, with Wednesday Mass at St. Anne's Parish, with conversations with Nancy Rodriguez, my lifelong neighbor, but no matter how hard I tried to disguise it, the pain was always there, causing a deep sadness in my chest, like a constant presence that wouldn't let me breathe properly. It was while going through my old papers in the wooden trunk that had belonged to my mother that memories began returning with full force. I found birth certificates, vaccination records that I had kept so carefully, report cards where Hope always got straight A's. I remembered every sacrifice, the early morning sewing dresses for neighborhood ladies to pay for Hope's English course at the Anglo Institute, the times I ate just tortillas with salt so she could have meat on her plate, the birthday gifts I saved all year to buy. I remembered the times she came home crying because her friends had name-brand clothes, and I would go out the next day to the flea market to buy exactly what she wanted, even if it meant being late on the month's rent. During all these years, Hope always had an excuse for not including me completely in her life. First it was her studies, then work, then her boyfriend Ryan, who didn't get along well with mothers-in-law. I always accepted, always understood, always adapted to her schedule, her wishes, her decisions. But now, looking back, I realized that I kept becoming smaller and smaller in her life, occupying less and less space, until reaching the point where I didn't even know she was getting married. The Hope I raised, whom I loved unconditionally, whom I always put first, had become a stranger who shared with me only crumbs of attention when it was convenient for her. I'm so glad you're still here. Would you do me a small favor? Tap the like button and leave a white heart below. Knowing you're still here truly makes me happy. That Thursday afternoon, while organizing family photos in a shoebox, I found one that made me cry like I hadn't cried in years. It was from Hope's first communion day. She was 8 years old. She wore a beautiful white dress that I had custom made with seamstress Mrs. Elena Martinez from the Santa Teresa neighborhood. In the photo, Hope was hugging me tight and smiling with pure, genuine happiness. I was smiling too, but now I could see in my eyes from that time something I had lost. The certainty that I was unconditionally loved by my daughter. I remembered that day perfectly. I had saved for 6 months for that celebration. I rented the party hall La Hacienda on Main Street. I invited the whole family, prepared barbacoa, carnitas, horchata water, and a tres leches cake I specially ordered from Sweet Maria Bakery. Hope felt like a princess, running from table to table, introducing me to everyone as my mama, the prettiest one in the world. That night, when everyone had gone, she helped me collect the plates and told me, "Mama, when I'm grown up and have my own parties, you're always going to be the most important person. Always." Tears ran down my cheeks as I held that photograph. What had happened to that little girl who promised me I would always be the most important person? At what moment had I become someone so insignificant that I didn't even deserve to be present at her wedding? I continued looking through the photos and found another one that hurt just as much. Hope at 15, the day of her quinceañera party. We had rented the Pine Hall in the valley. There was a country band, food for 150 people, an orchestra for the waltz. I had worked double shifts for a whole year to be able to give her that party. I cleaned houses during the day, babysat at night, sold tamales on weekends at the neighborhood market, all to see her happy, so she could have the celebration she deserved. In that photo, Hope and I were dancing together, mother and daughter, during one of the songs the band played. She had asked me to dance to Las Mañanitas because she said it was our special song. "Mama, you used to sing this song to me when I was little and sick, and it always made me feel better," she had told me. "I want us to dance to it together so everyone knows how much I love you." Those words resonated in my mind like echoes from another life. How had I gone from being the person who consoled her when she was sick to being someone she was ashamed of in front of her new family? I continued looking through the photos and found a letter that Hope had written to me when she was 18, just before entering university. She had written it on pink paper with her careful handwriting full of little hearts drawn in the margins. It said, "Dear Mama, tomorrow I start a new stage of my life, but I want you to know that nothing I achieve will be possible without everything you have done for me. You are my heroine, my role model, the bravest woman I know. When I grow up, I want to be a mother like you, loving, sacrificing, who always puts family first. I love you with all my heart, and you will always be the most important person in my life. Your daughter who adores you, Hope." I read that letter 3 times before I could believe what I was reading. This was the same person who had just excluded me from the most important day of her life. The same one who had promised me I would always be the most important person. I sat on my bed with the letter trembling in my hands and cried like I hadn't cried since the day I buried James. I cried for the little girl who wrote those words and for the woman she had become. I cried for all the dreams I had about being the mother of the bride. I cried for all the times I imagined helping her choose the dress, organizing the bachelorette party, walking with her to the altar. I cried for the mother-daughter relationship I thought we had and that apparently only existed in my imagination. After crying came the anger. An anger I had never felt in my 67 years of life. How dare she treat me like this after everything I had done for her? How could she be so cruel, so ungrateful? I had sacrificed my youth, my social life, my own dreams, everything for her. I had worked until my bones ached so she could have opportunities I never had. And this is how she repaid me, with humiliation, exclusion, forgetfulness. But after the anger came something worse. Shame. I began to wonder if somehow I was to blame. Had I been too intense, too clingy, too ignorant for Hope's sophisticated new life? I remembered the faces of Thomas and Evelyn Gallagher when they met me. That subtle expression I hadn't known how to interpret at the time, but now understood clearly, pity mixed with discomfort. For them, I was the embarrassing mother-in-law who had to be tolerated, not accepted. I got up from the bed and looked at myself in my dresser mirror. There was Mary Louise Henderson, 67 years old, gray hair, rough hands from so much work, wrinkles around my eyes that spoke of years of worry. I wasn't elegant like Evelyn Gallagher. I hadn't traveled the world, Didn't speak foreign languages, didn't know about wines or theater. I was a simple woman who had done the best she could with what she had. But did that make me less valuable? Did that justify my own daughter treating me like I didn't exist? That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake thinking about all the signs I had ignored, all the moments when I should have realized I was losing my daughter. The family dinners that became sporadic, the phone calls that got shorter, the visits that required appointments. Everything had been gradual, so subtle, that I hadn't realized I was being systematically excluded from Hope's life. Friday morning, I decided to call my sister Ruth Ellen, who lives in Oklahoma. I needed to talk to someone, vent, seek advice. Ruth Ellen had always been the most direct of the sisters, the one who said things without beating around the bush. "How is it that she got married without telling you?" Ruth Ellen shouted when I told her what had happened. "That girl has lost her mind. How is it possible for a daughter to do that to her mother?" I told her the whole story, from the first changes in Hope's attitude to discovering the wedding on Facebook. Ruth Ellen listened without interrupting, which was rare for her. "Mary Louise," she finally told me in a serious voice, "I always told you that you gave that child too much. From the time she was little, you spoiled her, put her on a pedestal, and now you see the consequences. Children need limits. They need to understand that respect is earned and maintained." Her words hurt because I knew they had some truth. I had always indulged Hope. I had always given in to her tantrums. I had always put her needs before mine. But I had done it out of love, because I wanted her to have everything I couldn't have. "And now what am I going to do?" I asked between sobs. "Now you're going to do what you should have done years ago. You're going to live for yourself," Ruth Ellen responded firmly. "Hope has already made her decision about what place you occupy in her life. Now it's your turn to decide what place she's going to occupy in yours." After hanging up with Ruth Ellen, I sat in the kitchen for hours thinking about her words. She was right. Hope had clearly demonstrated what place I occupied in her new life. None. It was time for me to also make a decision about what place she would occupy in my new life. Saturday morning, while I was having my coffee and eating my sweet bread, like every day, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, I heard Hope's voice. "Mama, how are you?" she said in a cheerful voice, as if nothing had happened. "Fine, my daughter," I responded, controlling my voice so it wouldn't tremble. "I see you're back from the honeymoon. Hawaii was amazing. Ryan and I want to come by this afternoon to say hello and tell you all about it." To tell me all about it, after 15 days of silence, after excluding me from her wedding, now she wanted to tell me everything as if I were a casual friend she tells about her vacation. "What time are you thinking of coming?" I asked. "Around 5, does that work? We're bringing photos and some little gifts we bought you." Little gifts. As if some cheap souvenirs from Hawaii could compensate for the greatest humiliation of my life. "That's fine," I said. "I'll be waiting for you here." After hanging up, I stayed with the phone in my hand, feeling a mixture of emotions I didn't know how to handle. Part of me was happy that I would finally see my daughter, be able to hug her and tell her how much I had missed her. But another part of me, a part that grew with each passing hour, was furious about the coldness with which she had treated me, about the naturalness with which she assumed everything would be fine after what she had done. I spent the rest of the day cleaning the house, preparing sweet tea, buying fresh bread from the corner bakery. It was what I always did when Hope came to visit me. I made sure everything was perfect to receive her. But this time, while I mopped the floor and dusted the furniture, I wondered why I kept trying so hard for someone who clearly didn't value my efforts. At exactly 5 o'clock, Hope and Ryan arrived. Hope looked radiant, tanned from the beach sun, wearing new clothes and a look of total happiness. Ryan wore a polite but distant smile, the same one he always had when he came to my house. "Mama!" Hope shouted, hugging me as if we were best friends in the world. "I missed you so much. Look how tan I got." I hugged her back, inhaling her expensive perfume, which was no longer the same one she used when she lived with me. Everything about her was different. Her clothes, her hairstyle, the way she spoke. It was as if the Hope I knew had been replaced by a new and improved version that didn't include me. "Sit down," I told them. I served them sweet tea and bought fresh cornbread. "Oh, Mama, it looks delicious," said Hope, but I noticed she barely touched the bread. She probably didn't eat those kinds of things anymore. Her new sophisticated life didn't include cornbread from the neighborhood bakery. "Well, tell me everything," I said, sitting across from them in my small living room. "How was the wedding?" Hope exchanged a quick glance with Ryan before answering. "It was very beautiful, Mama, very simple, like we wanted. Nothing too elaborate." "Ah, and where was it?" I asked, though my heart was already shrinking. "In a precious little chapel in Austin, very intimate, very private. Just us and Ryan's parents as witnesses. Just them and Ryan's parents. As if I didn't exist. As if 28 years of raising her didn't give me the right to be there." "And why didn't you tell me anything?" I finally asked with a trembling voice. Hope sighed and put on that face she used to make when she was a child and got caught doing something wrong. "Mama, everything happened very quickly. You know how these bureaucratic things are. Suddenly the date came up and we decided not to complicate things. Besides, you know I've never liked big parties." Lie. Hope had always loved big parties. Her quinceañera, her graduation, all the celebrations we had done together had been with many guests, lots of food, lots of joy. But now for her wedding, she had decided she wanted something intimate that didn't include me. "But Mama," continued Hope in a sweet voice, "that's why we came today, to celebrate with you. Look at all the gifts we brought you." She took out a bag full of typical Hawaii souvenirs, a ceramic ashtray, some seashells, a t-shirt that said, "I love Hawaii," some coconut candies, gifts they had probably bought at the airport thinking, "Oh, we have to take something to Hope's mama. Thank you." "Mija," I said, feeling that each gift was like a slap disguised as kindness. We spent 2 hours talking about the honeymoon, about the places they visited, the elegant restaurants where they ate, the activities they did. It was like watching vacation photos of strangers. I nodded, smiled, asked the appropriate questions, but inside I felt something breaking definitively. When they left, after vague promises of seeing each other soon and inviting me to see their new apartment, I was alone in my living room, surrounded by the cheap souvenirs, feeling the weight of the silence they had left behind. That night, while I was putting the gifts away in a drawer where I knew I would never see them again, I made a decision that would change everything. If Hope could live without including me in the important moments of her life, then I could also learn to live without including her in the important moments of mine. And in that silence of the early morning, with my heart still aching, but with a new determination growing inside me, I began to plan the first step of my new life, a life where I would be the protagonist. Not just the sacrificing mother waiting for crumbs of attention, the Mary Louise who had waited her whole life for others to decide her place in the world had died that night. The one who would wake up the next day would be a completely different woman, a woman who had finally understood that respect is taught by example, and that sometimes the greatest love a mother can show is love for her own dignity. Sunday dawned with a clear sky that contrasted completely with the storm I carried inside. I got up earlier than usual, at 5 a.m, and for the first time in weeks I didn't feel that heaviness in my chest that had accompanied me since I discovered the wedding. In its place was something different, a cold clarity I had never experienced before. It was as if during the night I had gone through a silent transformation. As if the Mary Louise who had waited her whole life for others to define her place in the world had finally awakened from a very long dream. I prepared my black coffee without sugar, stronger than usual. I needed my mind to be completely clear for what I was about to do. I sat at the kitchen table where I had eaten breakfast for the last 15 years, where I had waited for so many calls from Hope that never came, where I had planned special meals for visits that were canceled at the last moment. But this morning that table no longer represented waiting or disappointment. It represented the place where Mary Louise Henderson was going to make the most important decision of her life. I took out an old notebook where I used to write down Hope's medical appointments when she was a child, important school dates, her friends' birthdays. Now I was going to use those yellowed pages to plan something completely different. My definitive exit from a life where I was no longer welcome. I wrote on the first page, Independence Plan, Mary Louise Henderson. August 12th, 2024. The date looked strange, written in my shaky handwriting, but the words felt more real than anything I had felt in years. The first thing I wrote down was to evaluate resources. During all these years of sacrifice, I had managed to save a considerable amount. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't unprotected either. I had the savings of a lifetime of work, a small but owned house in an area that had appreciated greatly in value, and something Hope never knew about. A secret bank account where I had deposited for years the extra money I earned sewing dresses for neighborhood ladies on weekends. I had opened that account when Hope turned 18, thinking it would be my wedding gift to her. Every dollar I deposited there I did imagining the moment when I would give it to her. My daughter, this is so you can start your marriage without debts, so you can have your own home, so you don't go through the difficulties I went through. For 10 years I had fed that account with the illusion of seeing Hope's happy face when she found out about the surprise. But now, after being excluded from her wedding, that money would take a completely different destiny. The second point on my list was investigating housing options. I couldn't stay in this house where every corner reminded me of years of waiting, where every phone call would make me think it could be Hope seeking reconciliation. I needed a new place, a space that was completely mine, where I could build a life that didn't depend on crumbs of attention from my daughter. I remembered that Nancy Rodriguez, my lifelong neighbor, had always told me about her sister Patricia, who had moved to a residential complex for older adults in Austin. It's wonderful, Mary Louise, Nancy had told me several times. There are activities, there's security, there are people our age. Patricia says she's never felt so free in her life. At the time, I thought those places were for people who didn't have family to take care of them. Now I understood they were for people who had decided to take care of themselves. The third point was the most painful, but the most necessary: gradually cutting ties. I couldn't simply disappear overnight because that would cause unnecessary drama and give Hope reasons to justify her behavior. My mama was always very dramatic. That's why we didn't include her in important things. No. My exit had to be as silent and dignified as my entrance into Ryan Gallagher's life had been. Gradual, respectful, but definitive. After breakfast, I bathed and put on my navy blue Sunday dress, the one I used for Mass at St. Anne's Parish. But this morning I wasn't going to Mass. I was going to start the most important investigation of my life. I took my purse, stored the notebook, and left my house with a determination I hadn't felt in years. My first stop was the bank. It was strange walking through the streets of my neighborhood, knowing that each step took me away from the life I had known for 67 years. Mr. Fernando Reyes, the executive who had handled my accounts for the last 10 years, was surprised to see me on a Sunday morning at the ATM. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson," he greeted me when he recognized me. "Everything all right?" "Everything's perfect, Mr. Reyes," I responded with a smile I didn't expect to have. "I'm just reviewing my financial options. I might need to make some movements this week." "Of course, ma'am. Monday I'm available if you'd like us to review your accounts in detail." "I would appreciate that very much. See you Monday." That small conversation gave me more energy than I expected. For the first time in years, someone was talking to me like a person capable of making important financial decisions, not like an old lady who needed others to handle her money. From there, I went directly to Austin, to the residential complex Nancy had mentioned. It was called Silver Horizons Retirement Community, and from the moment I got off the bus, I could see why Patricia liked it so much. It was a beautiful, clean place with well-maintained gardens and an atmosphere of tranquility I hadn't felt in years. The receptionist, a very kind lady named Patricia Simmons, received me with a genuine smile when I explained I was interested in learning about the facilities. How wonderful that you came, she said enthusiastically. We have 2 very nice apartments available. Would you like us to give you a complete tour? For the next 2 hours, Patricia showed me every corner of Silver Horizons. The apartments were small but comfortable, perfect for one person. They had a living dining room, 1 bedroom, a full bathroom, and an equipped kitchenette. What I liked most was the balcony overlooking the gardens, where I could imagine myself having my morning coffee and watching the sunset in the evenings. We have many activities, Patricia explained as we walked through the common areas. Mondays we have yoga class, Tuesdays embroidery and knitting, Wednesdays mass in the internal chapel, Thursdays ballroom dancing, Fridays movie night. Weekends we organize excursions to different places: the Hill Country, Galveston, Houston. Each activity she mentioned sounded like something I could enjoy. Things I had never done because I was always waiting for availability in Hope's schedule. And the people who live here are happy? I asked. Look, Mrs. Henderson, Patricia told me sincerely, most of our residents arrive here after complicated family situations. Some have lost their spouses, others have children who live very far away, others simply decided they wanted to live more independently. At first, many arrive sad, nostalgic, but after a few months, you see them and they seem like different people, happier, more active, more, how can I put it, more alive. Her words resonated deeply with me. More alive. How long had it been since I felt really alive? How many years had I spent simply existing, waiting for my daughter to include me in her life? What are the requirements to live here? I asked. Patricia explained the whole process. I had to be over 60, which I was. Have stable income to cover the monthly payment. I had enough savings for several years. Pass a basic medical evaluation to ensure I could live independently. My health was excellent. The monthly cost included maintenance, security, activities, and basic services. It was a considerable amount, but perfectly manageable with my savings. How long does the admission process take? I asked. If you bring all the documents this week, we could have everything ready in 15 days, Patricia responded. Are you interested in any of the apartments we saw? I looked again toward the balcony of the apartment I had liked most, the one facing the garden where I had seen several residents chatting animatedly under the shade of a large tree. In that moment, I made a decision that surprised me with how quick and clear it was. I'll take the one with the balcony facing the gardens, I said without hesitation. Excellent decision, exclaimed Patricia. That's one of the most requested ones. Here's the list of documents you need to bring and the contract so you can review it carefully. I returned home that afternoon with a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine hope. Not the hope that hope would change, not the hope that things would go back to the way they were before, but hope for a new life that depended solely on my own decisions. That night, instead of watching television like I did every Sunday, I dedicated myself to organizing my documents: birth certificate, proof of income, bank statements, identification. It was strange preparing papers to start a new life at 67, but each document I organized made me feel more confident about my decision. Monday morning I went to the bank exactly at 9 when they opened. Mr. Fernando Reyes attended to me with the same professional courtesy as always, but when I explained that I needed to make some important movements in my accounts for a personal investment, I noticed in his eyes a respect I hadn't seen before. Mrs. Henderson, it gives me great pleasure to know you're making proactive financial decisions, he told me while reviewing my account statements. I see that you've been very disciplined with your savings all these years. You have very solid resources. Hearing those words filled me with a confidence I didn't know I had. For so many years, I had lived with the mentality that I was a person of limited resources, someone who depended on the charity of others. But the reality was that I had worked hard, saved disciplinedly, and built a solid financial foundation without anyone's help. I need to make an important transfer to my checking account, I explained, and I'd also like to know about safe investments that could give me monthly income. During the next hour, Mr. Reyes explained different investment options that could give me regular income without touching the principal capital. It was information I had never sought before because I always thought my money was exclusively destined for emergencies or to help Hope. Now I saw that I had options, that I could make my money work for me instead of simply saving it for others. From there I went directly to the office of Attorney Miguel Santos, a lawyer Nancy had recommended years ago when I had problems with some house documents. I needed to make sure all my assets were in order, and more importantly, I needed to update my will. "Mrs. Henderson, what brings you here?" Attorney Santos asked when I entered his office. "I need to update my will and better organize my assets," I told him directly. If he was surprised by the nature of my visit, he didn't show it. During the next 40 minutes, we reviewed all my property documents, my bank accounts, my insurance policies. It was impressive to see everything together. I really had built considerable assets through pure work and discipline. "Do you have some specific changes in mind for the will?" he asked. "Yes," I responded without hesitation. "I want to leave 50% of my assets to charitable institutions that help single working mothers, and the other 50% to my daughter, but with a condition." "What kind of condition?" "That she can only access the inheritance after writing a letter explaining why she made certain decisions about our relationship. She doesn't have to ask for forgiveness. She just has to be honest about her reasons. That letter must be delivered to you as a witness, but she must write it even though I won't be here to read it." Attorney Santos noted everything carefully. "It's a very thoughtful condition, Mrs. Henderson. It gives her the opportunity to reflect on her actions without forcing a reconciliation." "Exactly," I confirmed. "I'm not seeking revenge, Attorney. I'm seeking for her to understand that actions have consequences, even the actions of children toward their parents." When I left the lawyer's office, I felt like a completely different person. I had taken total control of my financial situation, secured my future, and established clear limits for my relationship with Hope, even after my death. The following days passed in a whirlwind of activity that kept me busy and focused. I hired a moving service to evaluate my belongings. I decided to keep only the essentials: clothes, some small furniture, important photos, objects with real sentimental value. Everything else would be donated or sold. The hardest part was deciding what to do with Hope's things that I still kept in her room: school trophies, books, clothes she had left when she moved out. Finally, I decided to pack everything carefully in labeled boxes and leave them in a storage unit I rented near her apartment. If someday she wanted them, she could pick them up. If not, eventually they would be disposed of. During that week, Hope called me twice. The conversations were polite, but distant on both sides. She told me about her new job, about the apartment decoration plans, about the dinners she'd had with the Gallaghers. I listened politely, asked appropriate questions, but didn't share anything about my own plans. For the first time in years, I had important secrets that didn't include my daughter. "Is everything okay, Mama?" she asked me during the second call. "You sound different." "Everything's perfect, Mija," I responded with total honesty. "I'm just organizing some things in the house. You know how it is. Do you need help with anything?" The question would have excited me before. Now it simply confirmed that Hope still saw me as someone who needed help, not as someone capable of solving her own problems. "No thank you, Mija. Everything's under control." Friday of that week, I received a call from Patricia at Silver Horizons. My application had been approved, and I could move in the following Monday if I wanted. That night, alone in my house, surrounded by packed boxes and furniture covered with sheets, I didn't feel sadness or nostalgia. I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: the excitement of beginning something new. Saturday morning, while I was having my last coffee at the kitchen table, where I had planned so many special meals for Hope, my phone rang. It was her. Mama, Ryan and I want to invite you to dinner tomorrow Sunday. We're going to inaugurate the new dining room in the apartment. It was the invitation I had waited for months. Finally, they wanted to include me in something, show me their new home, treat me like part of their life. But it was too late. "Oh, my daughter, what a shame," I responded with a serene voice. "Tomorrow I have plans." "Plans? With whom?" "With some new friends. We're going to visit the hill country." It wasn't a lie. The residents of Silver Horizons had a scheduled excursion for Sunday, and I had already signed up. "But Mama, we can change it for another day. It's important to us that you see our home." "Thank you, Mia, but I already committed myself. Maybe another day with more time." There was silence on the other end of the line. Hope wasn't used to me having plans that didn't include waiting for her. "Well, okay. We'll organize something later." "Of course, Mija. Have a very nice dinner." When I hung up, I stayed sitting in that familiar kitchen for the last time, smiling with deep satisfaction. For the first time in my life, Hope had had to adjust to my schedule instead of me adjusting to hers. It was a small change, but it symbolized a much bigger transformation. Mary Louise Henderson had stopped being a woman who waited to be included to become a woman who had her own life, her own plans, her own happiness. Sunday night, after returning from the beautiful excursion to the hill country, where I had met 3 charming ladies who would be my new neighbors, I packed my last personal belongings. The move would be early Monday morning, and by noon I would be settled in my new home. That last night in the house where I had raised Hope, I didn't cry or feel nostalgia. Instead, I felt deep gratitude toward the woman I had been and genuine excitement for the woman I was becoming. I had made the bravest decision of my life, choosing my own happiness over waiting for others' approval. Early Monday morning, while the moving workers loaded my few belongings, I looked one last time at each room in the house. In Hope's bedroom, now completely empty, I whispered a silent goodbye. "Thank you for teaching me that true love sometimes means knowing when to walk away." The Mary Louise who left that house that Monday morning was a completely new woman. A woman who had learned that dignity is not negotiable, that respect is taught by example, and that it's never too late to start over when you make the right decision. As the moving truck drove away toward Austin, toward my new life at Silver Horizons, I sat in the passenger seat, smiling toward the future. For the first time in 67 years, I didn't know exactly what awaited me, and that uncertainty felt like the most beautiful freedom in the world. The first week at Silver Horizons passed like a beautiful dream I didn't want to wake up from. Each morning I woke up in my new apartment, prepared my coffee in the kitchenette that was completely mine, and went out to the balcony to see the gardens where I had already identified my new neighbors. Margaret Lee, 72 years old, who had been an elementary school teacher for 40 years. Ellen Price, 69, who had worked in a government office and had fascinating stories from her youth. Richard Rick Palmer, 75, a widower like me, who had been a carpenter and now dedicated himself to making small furniture to give to his new friends. It was strange feeling part of a group where I was valued for who I was, not for what I could do for others. In the communal meals, my new friends asked me about my life, my opinions, my plans. Nobody saw me as someone's mama or the uncomfortable mother-in-law. I was simply Mary Louise, a woman with her own stories, her own dreams, her own personality. Wednesday of my first week, I participated in the embroidery class directed by Diane Turner, an elegant 74-year-old lady who had been a seamstress in her youth. While embroidering flowers on a napkin, I realized it had been years since I had done something for pure pleasure, without thinking about whether Hope would like it or if it would be useful for the house. "You know what, Mary Louise?" Diane told me while reviewing my work. "You have a very good hand for this. You should come to all the classes." It was a simple compliment, but it reached my heart. How long had it been since I received recognition for something I had done well? In my previous life, my achievements were always measured by how much they helped Hope. Now, for the first time, someone valued my work for itself. Thursday was my first ballroom dance class. Harold Burns, a very distinguished 76-year-old gentleman who had been a physical education teacher, directed the classes with contagious patience and joy. At first I was embarrassed because I hadn't danced in decades, but Harold reassured me. "Here nobody judges, Mary Louise," he told me with a kind smile. "We come here to have fun and remember that it's never too late to learn new things." During that class, I danced country swing, waltz, and even a little bit of salsa. I laughed like I hadn't laughed in years. My classmates applauded when I managed a difficult step, helped me when I got confused, made me feel like I was part of a real family, a family that had chosen me and that I had chosen too. That night, while I was having dinner alone in my apartment, but without feeling lonely, my phone rang. It was Hope. "Mama, where are you?" she asked with an altered voice. "I went to look for you at the house and it's completely empty. The neighbors told me you moved. What's happening?" Her voice had a mixture of confusion and panic I hadn't heard since she was little and got lost at the market. For a moment, my maternal instinct wanted to calm her immediately, explain everything, assure her I was okay. But the new Mary Louise who had emerged in these last weeks maintained her calm. "I'm very well, Mika," I responded with a serene voice. "I moved to a place more suitable for my age." "More suitable? What does that mean? Why didn't you tell me anything?" "Because they were personal decisions that didn't require your approval," I said firmly but without aggression. There was a long silence on the other end. Hope wasn't used to me making important decisions without consulting her, even though she had spent years making hers without consulting me. "Where are you living now?" "In a place where I'm happy, my daughter." "That's what's important. Mama, you're scaring me. This isn't normal for you. Are you angry with me about something?" The question would have disarmed me before. I would have run to explain that I wasn't angry, that I loved her, that I just wanted us to be happy together. But now I saw that question for what it really was, an attempt to return to the previous dynamic where I was responsible for managing her emotions. "I'm not angry." "Hope, I'm living my life." "What does that mean?" "It means I finally understood that I have the right to make my own decisions, to have my own plans, to be happy without depending on others' approval." Another silence. I could imagine Hope on the other side trying to process this version of her mother she didn't know. "Can you tell me where you are? Ryan and I are worried." Ryan and I. It was always Ryan and I, as if they were a single entity making joint decisions about my life. But there was something in Hope's tone that was different. For the first time in a long time, she seemed genuinely worried about me, not just annoyed because I wasn't available when she needed me. "I'm at Silver Horizons in Austin," I finally told her. "It's a very nice residential complex for people my age. A nursing home." The word bothered me, but didn't surprise me. For Hope, any place where older people lived automatically became a nursing home. "No, Mija, it's a place where I live independently, but with the company of people who are in my same stage of life. I have my own apartment, my own activities, my own social life." Social life. There was genuine surprise in her voice, as if she had never considered that I could have a social life independent of her. "Yes, Hope. I have new friends, activities I enjoy, plans that don't include waiting for you to have time for me." The words came out more direct than I had planned, but I didn't regret having said them. It was time for Hope to understand the consequences of her decisions. "Mama, we've always had time for you." "Really? Did you have time to include me in your wedding?" The silence that followed was long and heavy. It was the first time I had directly mentioned the wedding exclusion, and we both knew it was the elephant in the room that had been present in all our subsequent conversations. "Mama, I already explained that everything happened very quickly, that it was something very simple." "Hope," I interrupted her with a firm but calm voice, "I'm not interested in hearing more excuses. What happened, happened. I'm not looking for apologies or explanations. I just want you to understand that decisions have consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "The consequence that I finally understood. I'm not a priority in your life, and I've decided you're not going to be a priority in mine either." The words came out with a clarity that surprised me. There was no anger in my voice, no resentment, just a tranquil honesty that made me feel freer than I had felt in years. "Does that mean you don't want to be my mama anymore?" The question hurt because I could hear the little girl behind the adult woman. But it also strengthened me because it reminded me that Hope knew exactly what she had lost. "I will always be your mother, my daughter, but I'm no longer going to be the mother who waits for crumbs of your attention. I'm no longer going to be the mother who accepts any treatment just to be present in your life. If you want a relationship with me, it's going to have to be a relationship of mutual respect." Today, 6 months later, I wake up every morning in my small but cozy apartment. I look out the window and see a different world. It's not a world without pain, but it's a world where I choose who forms part of my story. I cultivate my plants on the terrace, read the books I always wanted to read, attend the new chapel where nobody knows me as Hope's mama. I'm simply Mary Louise Henderson, a 67-year-old woman who is learning to live for herself after decades of living exclusively for others. Sometimes I receive calls from unknown numbers that I know are from Hope trying to talk to me through other people's phones. I hear her voice on the answering machine, always crying, always asking for forgiveness, always promising she's going to change. But some exclusions cause pain too deep to be healed with just words. Some rejections are too definitive to be forgiven with simple regret. Hope had the opportunity to include me in the most important moment of her life and chose to leave me out. Now I choose to leave her out of my new life. During these months, I've learned that the loneliness I feared doesn't exist when you live in peace with yourself. My days are full of activities that nourish my soul. The freedom I feel now wasn't born from punishing Hope, but from liberating myself. It wasn't born from revenge, but from self-respect. It wasn't born from hate, but from self-love that had been sleeping for too many years. Sometimes the greatest gift a mother can give is the silence she chooses to maintain. And in that silence, Mary Louise Henderson finally found her voice, her strength, and her peace. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, the ones on your screen are just for you. If this story brought a word, a thought, or a feeling to your mind, share it in the comments. Let's see whose words will touch the most hearts. Thank you for listening.